Hey, we're doing a podcast on Spotify now. It's called Matt and Shane's Secret Podcast. It's a lot of fun.
Today, we're going to talk about how Spotify's recent moves into the video podcast space isn't only disrupting the market, it's disrupting themselves and possibly destroying the entire podcast ecosystem. Before we get too deep into it, I'd like to thank the executive producer of this episode, Christopher Hart. If it weren't for Christopher Hart's big baller support, I would probably get some jeans that are a little thick in the thigh area and then just kind of bend my leg so that just my knee is exposed, like in the bottom of the jean short, so it looks like I'm an amputee, and it'd make it a lot easier to beg on freeway off-ramps. But because of Christopher's big baller support, I don't even have to fake one amputation. And if you'd like to become a big baller support of the show, you can go ahead and click the Patreon link in the description below. Welcome to Catching You Up With
Nadav, it's okay, die.
So I don't know if you guys have been noticing this, but I've been seeing a whole bunch of podcasts kind of just announcing, hey, we're on Spotify now. And let me tell you, no one is doing that for free. What Spotify has been trying to do since that first Rogan deal is taking part of the podcast market share. It's already dominating in music, but it's like, what else can we take that's audio? And the answer to that is podcasts. So it's making all these moves to try and get more people to come to Spotify to listen to podcasts. And for the most part, this means competition, and I'm fully in support of competition. And they even announced that they're getting to the video podcast space, which means they are taking full-on stabs at YouTube, and let me tell you, that excites me, financially and sexually. Finally, a company big enough to actually take a swing at YouTube is taking a swing. But as I saw some things unfolding, what I realized is really the only ones getting a good deal are the big boys that are making actual announcements that they're joining Spotify, because that was part of their contract. But everyone else is just kind of stuck with the shit end of the stick. Hey, do you want to be in the Spotify video algorithm on a advertisement shelf right next to the big boys? Isn't that exciting to be in the algorithm right next to them? They might accidentally misclick on your stuff. Isn't that cool? And for most people, the answer to that is yes. But there's so much more involved in this that makes it a shitty deal for anyone that isn't getting a big check. Before I explain to you why this is so shitty, let me explain to you how the podcast ecosystem works. The thing is that a lot of people still listen to podcasts audio only, two different types of ads. There's the host-read baked-in ads, which is like, hey, go to cbdistillery.com and use promo code Nadav to get 20% off. But if you're listening just to audio, there's something called dynamic ad insertion, which means it's an ad that most likely the host isn't reading, and it's interchangeable. So if you listen to that podcast today, it's going to be one ad, and if you listen to it 6 months from now, it's going to be a completely different ad that it got replaced with. And this is how the audio podcast ecosystem works. There are agencies that sell both baked-in host-read ads and dynamic ad insertions. And in order for them to move ads around, you need to host your audio on their platform so that they can get in the back end and those nerds move over permission bits for the Perl scripts to get the mem cache on the back end of the mainframe that they're looking for. And I need to emphasize, this is good for podcasters, this is good for advertisers, and it's good for ad sellers. That's what you might call an ecosystem. And what Spotify is doing is completely fucking up that ecosystem. And the way it's working right now is that it's rewarding early adopters that decide to go all in with the Spotify video podcast network, or whatever the fuck they're calling it. There's nothing wrong with big companies making big money deals with other podcast companies. That's capitalism. But Spotify, instead of figuring out how to enmesh into the ecosystem to take away a big slice and disrupt it, it's just like, nah, you know what? We're gonna make a new system, and hopefully you'll like it so much that we'll make you dependent on it and that you can't leave. And I think they pulled that trigger a little too early. But let me get into the things that absolutely suck about it. So firstly, if you want to be a true partner of the Spotify video program, you have to use Spotify as your platform. And that way you can upload your video, and then it takes the audio from that video and it makes it available as audio so that if people don't want to watch it, they can still listen to it. And they'll insert their own dynamic ad insertions into that. Spotify does not sell host-read, baked-in reads anymore. They used to, but now they don't. All they offer now is dynamic ad insertion. And their split on that is 50-50. Meaning they take half of your advertising money, which I don't care what industry you're in, that's fucking insane. What the fuck kind of deal is this? Oh, and not only that, but they're also not transparent with what ads get put where. Meaning they're just doing their own weird black magic behind their wall, which is also crazy. That lack of transparency is insane. And I will caveat that with, I love where Spotify's heart is at. They're trying to disrupt. I love seeing attempts at disruption. But this is a step beyond disruption. This is breaking / devastating the ecosystem. Here's the thing. If you don't host on Spotify's platform, but you do want to put your video on there, what they'll do is they'll take your video, take the audio from your video, and then that becomes the audio part on their platform. Meaning, all the dynamic ad insertions that your previous ad agency had inserted is now getting stripped away. So they're straight up stripping a source of revenue for you. It's bad business. It's bad business. It's one thing to take advantage of a new video algorithm that's probably overpowered and swayed in one direction. And if you're a podcast that's an early adopter and has figured out how to gain popularity through this program, that's fucking great. Especially if monetization isn't a huge priority for you. If growth is your biggest priority, you can absolutely take advantage of this program. However, if you are dependent on income to make your podcast work, and you're now giving 50% of your revenue to Spotify just for hosting on there, who do you give 50% to that you're okay with? Fuck that, dude. Fuck that. And again, I have to, I'm raising my voice, but I do have to caveat it with, I like where Spotify's heart is at. I just don't like where their brain is at. Now, there's a couple podcast newsletters that I subscribe to, and they'll share headlines of stuff that's going on in the industry. But here's an interesting case study that I saw. All right. So in this newsletter about the podcast world, a podcast rep named Amanda McLaughlin wrote an article that boiled down to how much can you earn by switching your podcast to Spotify's new video podcast partner program? One company did and actually lost nearly $1,000 in January after switching to Spotify video. Amanda McLaughlin posts on LinkedIn. To use video on Spotify, she explains, publishers need to agree for their RSS feed to be replaced by a Spotify-hosted video file, used even if listeners only consume the audio track. So one show lost more than half its revenue because it was unable to sell dynamic audio ads to Spotify listeners, ironically through Spotify's audience network. The Spotify Partner Program is an untested program with secretive math, concludes McLaughlin. The risk just isn't worth it. Here's another interesting thing that I saw from another podcast newsletter. Spotify shared some creator earnings from the first month of the Spotify Partner Program. Hundreds of podcast creators surpassed $10,000 in monthly revenue, the company said, but also gave 3 specific examples of January earnings. Your Mom's House with Christina P. and Tom Segura, and Two Bears, One Cave with Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer. 2 podcasts from YMH Studios saw combined earnings of more than $105,000. These shows may do a total of 6.5 million downloads a month. And I know $105K per month seems like a lot of money for 2 shows. But from my experience, it's kind of not. Think of the overhead of how much it costs to make these shows. If you've ever seen any of the behind the scenes footage over at the YMH Studios, there's a lot of people that work there. Does $105,000 a month cover all of their salaries? And also the message of this article feels a little buried in deception. Hundreds of podcast creators surpassed $10,000 in monthly revenue. So it's trying to say look at all these people making what most people would call enough money on this program. But if it was truly successful and truly a disruptor, it would say something closer to, look at all these podcasts that have moved over to Spotify and are now making so much more money because of it. They didn't write that. It's not a brag. What I want is a convincing argument on why it's better. This is how much they made before joining Spotify, and this is how much they made after, organically, without some sort of money guarantee deal. Because if they, without a doubt, made more money joining Spotify than just sticking to their own audio platform where they sold ads on it, like, that is a sign of true disruption, where it's like, oh shit, they're working within the ecosystem and making this work better than any other company that's made it work. And that's not what they're saying. They're saying everything but that. But what I think is happening is they are inking deals that are probably going to last somewhere between 1 and 3 years apiece. And when those deals expire, those podcasts are gonna be like, yeah, we're fucking moving back to the thing that makes us more money. Because unless they're giving you a fat paycheck, it doesn't really make sense to move to Spotify. I love the attempt. Again, I have to caveat it with, I love the attempt at taking a swing and taking a slice of YouTube's video podcast market. But this just doesn't seem like a good way to do it. It's a complicated time to be making decisions for Spotify right now, because there isn't really a right decision, but there is a wrong decision. And I think they're making it. Does this mean that things can't change? No. Spotify can start pivoting on this shit, and I'm sure in a few months, when all the other podcasts that have joined the Spotify partner program are like, hey, I'm making a lot less money than I did before I joined this program, and they start leaving, Spotify will start making changes then. But until then, I don't really see it happening. Right now, every single company that sells ads is pulling their hair out saying, Spotify, why the fuck are you doing this to us? And it's not even like Spotify is eating their lunch. You know what Spotify is doing? They're grabbing your sacked lunch on the schoolyard, and they're taking the bag of potato chips and like the sandwich that your mom made and like the juice box, the Capri Sun, fucking all that. They're just throwing it over the fence of the school. So they're just eating the bag of chips, and it's like, dude, there's a whole meal to eat here, and you're throwing it away. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone that you're seeing on screen right now. They're all producers of the show and contribute to my Patreon. And it'd be hard to do this as regularly as I do. And if you'd like to become a supporter of the show, you can go ahead and click the Patreon link in the description below. Most of all, I would once again like to affirm,
This is a totally unconfirmed news.
we'll see you next week.